So the second half of 2.5 is continuing multiplying decimals. And just a quick reminder that when you multiply a decimal by another decimal, you're going to do the same thing we did before. You're going to count the number of spots after the decimal. Just you're going to remember to count all of the digits after all of the decimals and add all of those up. And that's how many spaces you'll need in your answer after the decimal. So watch the next example to see what this looks like. Example 3, part A, has us multiplying 4 and 8/10 by 7 and 2/10. And remember that you don't have to line the decimals up. It just so happens that they're lined up this time because of the numbers that they gave us. It just happens to be a ones place and a tenths place and another ones place and a tenths place. But you're still going to want to be careful in the end that you don't just drop your decimal down. But first go ahead and pretend the decimals aren't there and just do your regular multiplication. So 8 times 2 is 16, write the 6, carry the 1, and then do the 2 times 4, which is 8, plus 1, which is 9, and then you're going to go down to the next row and put your placeholder 0 in and make sure you get rid of anything you're not using up here, and then you're going to do your multiplication for here, 8 times 7, which is 56, and then you're going to write the 5 over there, 7 times 4, which is 28, plus 5, which is 33, and then you're going to add just like we have been and make sure everything gets lined up really carefully. But as I said before, you're not going to want to just drop your decimal down even though it looks like we do when we add and subtract fractions or decimals and the decimals are all lined up. Remember, this time you're going to see how many digits are after each decimal. So there's 1 here and there's 1 here. So there are a total of 2 digits after the decimals, which means we need 2 digits after our decimal answer here. So your final answer would be 34 and 56 hundredths. And again, you can estimate here. It's never a bad idea to estimate. So 4.8 would be pretty close to 5, and then a 7.2 or 7 and 2/10 would be pretty close to 7. And so you could multiply those together, and the estimated answer would be right around 35, which is pretty close to 34 and 56 hundredths. On part B, they have us multiplying 3 and 1/10 by 0 and 5 hundredths. And again, we're going to kind of remember that technically 3 and 1/10 is a bigger number because 3 is bigger than 0, but you can go ahead and put the longer number on top if you would like to. And so you can put the 0 and 5 hundredths at the top, and then you can just put the 3 and 1/10 at the bottom, and you don't even really have to worry about whether they're lined up because we're going to deal with the decimals at the end of it. And so you can just multiply. 1 times 5 is 5, and then 1 times 0 is 0, and it's going to happen 2 times. So you've got the 0 and the, whoops, sorry, doesn't look much like a 0. That's the 0 and that's the 0. And then when we're done multiplying that ones place out, we can put the placeholder 0 in there, and then we keep multiplying the 3 times each of the place values. So 3 times 5 is 15. Write the 5, carry the 1, and then 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is actually just 1, and then 3 times 0 is 0, and then we add those up, 5, 5, 1, 0, and then again, we're going to really watch carefully here to notice that there are 2 digits here and 1 digit here. So there is a total of 3 digits after all the decimals. So we need 3 digits after our decimal here. So we're going to stick the decimal there. And so that would be 155 thousandths. And again, it's a good idea to estimate, especially with multiplying decimals. So if we were to round or estimate the 0 and 5 hundredths, that's pretty close to 0. And then 3 and 1/10 is pretty close to 3. So 0 times 3 is 0, and that's pretty close to what we got here because, again, in that ones place, it's actually still 0. And then we have 155 thousandths, but that's still a pretty small number. For example 4, we're going to keep working on evaluating expressions. And so we're going to try to figure out what is the value of 2 and 44 hundredths times, because remember, anytime you have parentheses right next to another number with no operation sign in between, then that means multiplication. And so if you need to write a little reminder to yourself in there, go ahead and do that. Oops, just make sure it doesn't look like a plus sign because we're multiplying there. And then so we're multiplying that by 4.5 or 4 and 5 tenths minus 3 and 175 thousandths. And order of operations tells us we're going to go ahead and do this part first. So we're just going to set up our subtraction. And remember, when you start dealing with decimals, again, you have to know when to line things up and when not to line things up. And when you're doing adding and subtracting, you do have to make sure that everything is lined up. And I realized that I just wrote the wrong number because I was talking while I was writing. And not only do we have to line it up, but we have to make sure that you put, with subtraction, everything in the correct order. So 4 and 5 tenths came first, and from that we're going to subtract 3 and 175 thousandths. And we're going to remember here that since we have to line up these decimals, then that gives us a couple of blank spaces here. So we're going to just go ahead and put in those zeros before we do any subtraction. And after you do the regular subtraction, then when we're adding and subtracting decimals, we're just going to remember to drop that decimal right down from where it's lined up, and you're going to put it right in between the 1 and the 3. So the subtracted answer is 1 and 325 thousandths. And so remember, we're doing order of operations here. So our original problem was this one. And we still try to do funnel steps whenever we're doing order of operations. So nothing has changed here, but we're going to, in the parentheses, then put 1 and 325 thousandths. And then since those are right next to each other, that means we're going to multiply. But again, that's going to probably require some side math here. So we're going to set it up, and this is what we've been working on all chapter long. So we're going to set it up with the longer number on top. 1 and 325 thousandths is longer, and then you can put your 2 and 44 hundredths underneath there, and you don't have to worry about lining up decimals when you're multiplying. So here we did have to line them up, here we don't, and then we're just going to do our multiplying. And there's the first row, and then we're going to remember to put a placeholder 0 here for that spot, and then we're going to keep multiplying. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all those because we don't want to mix them up. And now we're going to multiply the 4 by each of our place values. And again, you probably figured it out, but since these were both 4s and we were multiplying by the same numbers here, these are exactly the same, but we do have that placeholder 0 down here. And again, we're done with this one, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of all of these. This is why it's important that we organize things as best we can. And then we're going to do this final row of multiplication, and remember, we're going to do a placeholder 0 for each of these spots, and then we're going to multiply the 2 by everything. And when we do multiply the 2 by everything, we get this row down here, and now we're just going to add our columns up carefully. So 0, 0, 3, 5 and 5 is 10, plus 3 more is 13, 5 and 1 is 6, plus another 6 is 12, 2 and 1 is 3, but then we're going to remember that we have to go up here and we have to see there are 3 digits here, 2 digits here after the decimals, so we're looking for a total of 5 digits down there. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to put the decimal in between so that you have all 5 of those digits after that decimal. And so your final answer, if you wanted to, you could drop off all these extra zeros at the end, but your final answer then would be 3 and 233 thousandths, and that happens to be answer choice D, or excuse me, I said that wrong. The answer choice is A for that one, according to the multiple choice answers that they give you, and so that's your final answer.